You're Free to Go is sponsored by Milburn Men's Clothing, where top athletes shop for sharp, tailored style. And whether Mark and I are in the studio or the courtroom, Milburn dresses us for success. Mention YFTG and get 10% off at Milburn Men's Clothing, which has been providing the finest in men's clothing and suits since 1946. Call 651-645-2922 or visit www.milburn.com. This is your Free to Go, the #1 podcast out there from real criminal defense lawyers talking about our real cases. And before we get started today, we're going to take a moment for a really serious and emotional topic for the two of us. Mark, in the last month, our really good friend and great colleague of ours, Roy Black, passed away.
Yes.
And I just would love to have a moment with you, nostalgic moment.
Remembering him.
To remember him, to honor him.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, maybe you'll start Googling him as we talk, but Roy Black was by far one of the greatest criminal defense attorneys ever in this country, and a great, great man, philanthropic, brilliant, a great family man, and a mentor to me, and I know you've had experiences.
Yeah. I've had the privilege of trying a number of cases with Roy, and I remember one of the first ones was the Miami River Cops case, that celebrated case in the late 1980s where... there
were a lot of defendants, right?
There were 6, 7 City of Miami police officers who were charged with, drug distribution and causing the death of a number of drug dealers. They ripped off the drugs from drug dealers, and what happens, they had them drown in the Miami River, hence the name, the Miami River Cops. And I had the privilege of sitting next to Roy. We had different defendants, but we sat next to each other for almost 4 months of trial. And it was my first experience with him. And not only was he a great courtroom lawyer, but he had an amazing sense of humor, very dry sense of humor.
He was always saying something funny, always.
And we were telling jokes back and forth, because when you're in a very lengthy trial, a lot of times what happens is there are moments, especially when there are a number of different defendants, where the evidence that's being presented is not going to be against your client, may be unrelated to your case, to your defense, and it's sort of like you relax and you have to be there, although in the River Cops case, there were times the judge let us literally leave the courtroom.
Wow.
But Roy and I, during those moments when there was nothing going on that had any effect on our clients or our defense, we would just be telling jokes back and forth. We got to the point, we were so bored at one point, that we counted the ceiling tiles in the central, this giant courtroom, celebrated courtroom in Miami, in the old Miami courthouse, now with the post office building. And we just had a great time. And one of the things I learned about Roy is you went into his office, it was like filled with bookcases. And he had read every one of those books.
Right. Not only had he read them, but he had a photographic memory.
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah, when I had been in trials with him, and we'd have our, legal secretaries behind us to run back and forth with research, and he would literally say, this book, Southern Second, page 442, page 17, third paragraph. Like, he would remember, his memory was so incredible, and they'd come back with it and spot on the issue that he was looking for was right where he said it was.
But the thing about Roy that I loved was, and I got to know him fairly well, especially after I moved to California. It turns out Roy and his lovely wife Leah had a place in the Hollywood Hills that they would go to during the summer. They have parties, you invite us to the parties. And I remember, talking to him, and he was involved in some of the biggest cases, had some super, important clients over the years, but he never took himself too seriously. He didn't have that ego that was commensurate with his ability, and that I really respected. So when I heard that he had passed, it was a very sad moment.
Really sad. You mentioned ego. I'll share one experience. You talked about the Miami River Cop case. I had just left the prosecutor's office, so maybe I'm 26 at the time, opened my own law firm, and I get a referral for a sexual battery case. And I go to the bond hearing, I get the client out on bond, I'm meeting with him, I find out that he's worth over $100 million, a very wealthy man. He was referred to me by a big real estate attorney, and And I realized, boy, I've prosecuted these cases, but I've never defended one. I had just left the prosecutor, literally like the first case of my career. So I'm talking to him after he gets out of jail. He comes to my office with his wife. And I said, I can definitely defend this, but I think we should bring in someone else to team up with me. And he said, well, who do you recommend? I said, well, the greatest attorney in the country, this was before I met you, by the way, is right here in Miami, Roy Black. Why don't we meet with him? So we brought Roy on the case, and about 3 weeks into it, we had a really important court hearing and a very serious motion we were going to argue. And it was in Palm Beach. So Roy, driving up from Miami, picks me up in Boca, and we're driving to Palm Beach. And he says, if you want to rehearse your argument with me, go ahead. And now this is the most esteemed attorney in the country. And I am like just in awe that I'm in the car with him and that I'm co-counseling a case with him is beyond my wildest dreams. And now he's turning to me and say, why don't you practice your argument? I'm like, I literally say, Roy, you're arguing this motion. He's like, no. He said, you're going to do it. I trust you. I think you've got this. And from that moment on, the fact that he showed confidence, he had no ego, like you said, and he showed the confidence in me that I can handle this, it really helped set my career on the right path.
Well, it's not that he had no ego, because the truth is we all have egos.
Yes, we do.
As attorneys, as lawyers, but he had an ego in check.
In check.
He didn't have an ego that got in his way of doing what he needed to do, and also being a regular guy that you could hang out with. So
I love the times I had with him in the trials,
and I will miss him. And
also before we move on, he touched so many lives, not only his clients, but he was a professor at University of Miami for many, many, many years, and he taught evidence. And I once asked him, all these years later, why are you still teaching evidence? He said, if you know the rules of evidence better than anyone in the courtroom, you're going to win your cases.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because when I started teaching trial advocacy in law school, I remember talking to Roy about it, and he was telling me about the very thing you're saying, the importance of evidence. And of course, we all know that's the backbone, knowing the rules of evidence and how to get things into evidence, how to keep things out of evidence, is the key to trial lawyering.
Right.
And he was very helpful.
I remember his words clear as day, and we're going back, 1996, I think it was, where he said, Guy, if there's a piece of evidence that you want in and the government's objecting to it and the judge is inclined to agree with that objection, but you know how to get it in, you're going to get in. And likewise, if there's a piece of evidence the government wants in that you don't want in and you know how to keep it out, you're going to keep it out.
And you keep at it.
Yeah.
I mean, you keep at it. And there are a lot of ways to skin a cat, and we all have stories on that.
So that's why he continued to teach evidence.
Roy.
Right. And, wishing his partners, Howard Strebnick,
and his son,
Scott Kornspan, Marc Shapiro, great team of lawyers there. We wish them all the best.
Yes.
Leah, wish her well, and Roy Jr., the whole family. So,
all right.
All right. Well, today we're going to talk about some other cases. I've got a good one I've got teed up. Do you want to go with yours first?
Well, yeah, actually, when you mentioned the other day about the client, Adam, you called him, whose father left the family, I remembered a very interesting case that I had forgotten about. Years ago, I represented this fellow who was living in Florida and was married and had 2 lovely children, and he was working as a stockbroker. And he gets into trouble for actually ripping off his clients. He was actually sort of a mini Madoff. He was making believe that they had investments in certain stocks, and he was creating phony account statements, phony confirmation slips, phony documents.
It is a mini Madoff.
A mini Madoff.
Exactly, yeah.
But it was done at a very, very low level by today's standards.
By the way, so was Madoff. That was one of the shocking things.
How he started, and then...
Well, the numbers got big, but when you looked at his monthly statements, they were done on a dot matrix printer. I've seen those. I represented dozens of victims, literally, in the Madoff case. And they were an old, 1980 printer. People should have realized, boy, something's not right here. But obviously it grew into the billions.
What I learned about the Madoff case through representation of Scott Rothstein, who's, depending on whose numbers you believe, his Ponzi scheme, which was the largest in Florida history, was about 1.2 to 1.6 billion.
Right.
What I learned about Madoff compared to Rothstein is why Madoff lasted so long. He was paying his victims what were sort of commercially reasonable
Correct.
rates.
Right. Nothing crazy.
Nothing crazy.
Yeah.
So as a result, it grew slowly over time because as he paid out money to them that they didn't actually earn from new money that came in, a fraudulent scheme,
Definition of a Ponzi.
it worked slowly. Whereas in Rothstein, he was paying 50% return, in some instances 100% return.
So there was a lot more pressure for
So
him
there
to
was
bring
a
in
velocity.
More, right. He needed more and more
Right,
investors.
bigger and bigger and
Right.
bigger money right
Well,
away.
well-
But anyway, this particular client, he got into trouble for that. And while the case was being investigated, I get a call one day from the U.S. attorney on the case. And he said, "You're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you." And I said, "What?" He said, "I don't think you know," he said to me, "that your client is living a double life." I said, "What do you mean a double life?" He says he's married here in Florida for like 11 years. He's got 2 young daughters.
Which you knew that.
I knew
right?
that.
Yeah.
And working as a stockbroker. And he's married in Ohio. I forget the town in Ohio, a small town in Ohio. And he has a boy and a girl. And he's working there part-time, cutting hair.
Stockbroker here and a hairdresser there.
He got his license or whatever,
Oh, my God.
as a barber or whatever.
Right.
I guess he just wanted 2 different complete
Wow.
careers. And I said, "No, that's not
How does he
possible."
pull that off?
I said, "How did you find that out?" He said, "We did some investigation. Our agents followed up on some things, and we came across this, and we have documentation. We have his photograph from the license for the hairdresser license. We have all the information about the house he bought. We have all the information about the marriage license and everything." So he said, "On top of everything else, your client's a bigamist."
Right.
I said, no, that's just not possible. So immediately I got off the phone. I called my client and said, "I need you in my office." This was not a conversation I was going to
Right.
have.
You
over
want
the
it
phone.
face to face.
So
Was this a while ago, this case?
This was before I left Florida.
Right.
So this would have been about 15 years ago.
Right. So really before the cell phones, because now, yeah.
Well, there
nowadays,
still was cell phones,
but
and the internet was still around, but it
Right.
was not like it is today.
right, where you know where someone is at all.
Right.
Like a wife would know,
Right.
find your friend. on
Right,
their
right.
phone, Yeah.
They didn't have at the time probably the tracking devices on the phones
Right.
everybody can use now.
Right. I was just in Ohio last week playing Jack Nicklaus's golf course, Muirfield, and I could have used a haircut while I was out there. So
Well.
I would have called him if I knew.
He ain't cutting hair anymore.
He's
At
not.
least,
Maybe in prison. We'll get to that. Let's
yeah,
see.
we'll get to that.
Okay, let's hear.
So
it.
what happens is I get my client into the office. He sits down, and I spent about 30 seconds just looking at him, smiling like this.
How did you pull
And
this
he's
off?
wondering what the heck I'm looking at him with that smile. And finally I broke the ice. I said, "Listen, I don't know how or why you did it, but the government knows that you have 2 families, 2 marriages, 2 different jobs, and you're going back and forth between them." And what I couldn't understand is how he pulled that off. So what he would do is he had his own small cap brokerage firm. He didn't work for any of the biggies.
Yeah, it's hard when you talked about the Madoff. Like it has to be your own small cap
Yes,
business. You can't
right.
be with the big boys.
No.
Yeah.
You can't get away
pull
with it
Right.
with the biggies.
Yeah.
So what happened is he would, tell his clients and tell everybody, I'll do stuff online for you, but nobody can be in. And tell his wife that he was traveling to pick up new clients.
Networking.
And he somehow managed to do it in a way that she wasn't suspicious. He would call her all the time.
Mhm.
She never checked up on where he was, somehow, miraculously. And then he would go and he would spend couple of weeks or a week with his family in Ohio, and then he would convince them that he would be cutting hair for celebrities and rock stars and other people, so he had to travel.
Wow.
And
Yeah,
they believed
that's
him
that's
too.
that's believable, right?
Yeah. So what happened is he had plausible excuses why he would leave for a week or so, and he'd go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and somehow in the course of that managed to father 4 kids. So anyway, when he didn't even deny it, he just said, "Oh my God," he said, "I can't let them know."
Right.
He said, "I don't care what you do about the charges. Plead me guilty. I'll go to jail, but I can't let them know."
Right.
I said, "That's impossible.
Right.
You can't keep doing it. First of all, you're committing another crime. In each state, you're committing bigamy."
Wow. Right. But he didn't. I respect it. He didn't want to hurt the families and the kids,
And
right?
yeah, and
But
he was.
he
and
got
so what happened is, I went to the prosecutor. I said, "Look, he's willing to plead. He'll do his time." At the time, the guidelines, I think the guidelines just became permissive. They were no longer mandatory, and the numbers were not big.
Right.
But the prosecutor said, "Mark, your client's going to wind up getting the maximum sentence, because when the judge hears about what he did with these 2 families, it's almost worse. It is worse than what he did in ripping off these people."
Sure.
He said, "So how can I not tell the court?" I said, "We've got to find some way." And he said, "And do you honestly think he's not going to find, the families are not going to find
Right.
out?"
They're both going to show up at visitors' day at the prison.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
In fact, I think he even said that.
Yeah.
So I went back to him and I said, "Look, you got a double problem here. Your family's going to find out. You're going to wind up getting convicted," because the evidence against him was overwhelming.
Really? Yeah.
I said, "So, there's not a hell of a lot I can do. On the family side, I can't help you, okay? On the legal side, I'll help you get the lowest sentence possible, understanding that this federal judge is going to hear about what you did." I said, "So you better have some good explanation for it." And then he told me the story. He had been married in Florida first. He went out on a legitimate business trip to Ohio, met this woman on a train,
Wow.
sitting next to her, on a commuter train, sitting next to her, Cincinnati, that's right. And they started talking. They wound up having dinner. And he said he just immediately fell in love with her. And he couldn't not be with her. But he had already established his family, so
Right.
he was more in love with the woman in Ohio than he was with the woman here in Florida who had been married to for a while. So
Love is love, right?
is
Love
love.
is love. And instead of going to Miami and saying I want a
I said
divorce,
the honorable thing, obviously,
right,
to
the
be
right
done.
thing.
But he said I couldn't leave my kids. I love my kids. So anyway, so what happens is we go to sentencing. We come up with some mild form of explanation of why he got involved in that. And we actually used that as a means of explaining to the judge why he wound up, because he started the scheme, the Ponzi scheme, after he realized he now has to support
Or
two
two
families.
right, and-
Because neither wife was working. And so the judge took a look at everything. And I remember to this day, he called me and the prosecutor up to the bench. I said, "Mr. Nurk, I have been doing this for a very long time." He was older than I. He says, "I've been doing this for a very long time, but you have finally brought me the most unusual set of facts I have ever been involved in." I said, "Judge, is that good or bad?"
Right.
He looked at me and says, "Well, it's not good."
Yeah, they're a judge. They're a human being, just
Right.
just like I'm sitting here saying this is unbelievable. The judge has a role as a judge, and they try to stick to it, but you can't remove the human emotional and human reality and experiences from them.
Right.
So he's sitting there as a person looking into
But
this.
here's the crazy part about
Wow.
the case I forgot to mention. The family in Florida, the wife in Florida, knew about the charges.
Okay.
So they knew that he was facing these charges. They knew he was likely to go to jail.
Right.
He had not told the family in Ohio about it, not told his wife or his kids about it. And in fact, when he had to each time he had to come to court here in Florida or be in court in Florida, he would make some excuse, plausible excuse, why he couldn't be in Ohio. And I said, this subterfuge is not going to last.
Right.
So what happened at the sentencing, the Florida family is there. The
Right.
Ohio family's not.
Yeah.
He figured that's good.
Yeah, I was thinking strategically, maybe you have both families there sitting next to each other, smiling, holding hands. So it looked like they're all okay with this, even though it's still a crime.
Well,
But
when the judge, he made the other fatal mistake, and I told him, you've got to come clean, but I'm not a therapist. I tell him what I believe he needs to do. Apparently, he didn't come clean to either family. And when we're sitting there being sentenced, that's when the judge, and I told him this was the most idiotic thing you could do. Worse than the Ponzi scheme. You should have told the family in Florida about it. When he's sitting there, the judge then goes on and on about it. When the wife heard that, I turned around just to see what her reaction is. I mean, she was like frozen.
I bet. Were
10 minutes later.
Were the kids there too?
No.
No, thank God.
10
Okay.
minutes later, she gets up and walks out the courtroom.
Yeah.
Never came back.
Wow.
The PS to the story is he got a sentence of 11 years, which was under the guidelines less than what he was facing, but more than what we asked for. We thought maybe he'd get a 4 or 5 year sentence.
Right. Did he not have bigamy on his record?
And the judge just went on and on about what a reprehensible human being
Wow.
was. Then what happened is, ultimately, I learned this because I lost touch with him, but I heard from another source, the source who referred him to me, that both wives divorced him. The kids wouldn't come visit him.
Yeah.
He lost both families.
Lost everything. His freedom and his
So
family.
the moral of the story is don't get married twice
You're right.
at the same time. And if you do, tell them about it.
You're right. Be open, transparent.
Right.
Holy cow. Wow. That's one I'm going to be thinking about all night. I can't wait to run home and tell my friends, you got to listen to this episode. Some guys are going to ask him how
I'm
he
sure
was.
he's out by now
Right.
because
Yeah, it was a
this
while.
would have been about 13, 14, 15 years ago. And if he got 11 years, he probably did 9. For all I know, he got out early, especially during COVID.
That's
you
true.
remember. During COVID, a lot of our clients were being released
Early.
early because they were trying to thin out the herd in the prison
Right.
system.
Yes, they got a big reduction of sentence, a lot of those guys.
So he's long out. I don't know what he's doing. Probably got married a third time.
And fourth.
And fourth.
Well, I'm going to share my story, but before I do that, I just want to say we have a word from one of our sponsors.
Oh, definitely.
You're Free to Go is sponsored by Lang Realty, South Florida's premier residential real estate broker. Whether you're buying, selling, or renting a home or condo, Lang's experienced realtors are standing by ready to help you. Contact one of Lang's top realtors today at 561-703-2427. We're going to talk about Harry from the Hamptons.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Harry from the Hamptons. So Harry was arrested for dealing in stolen property. He was selling stolen jet skis, and he got arrested. And he hired a lawyer. The lawyer was not very experienced. He was an old timer, but never really had any traction with his practice. And but a good guy. I knew him around the courthouse. And the attorney pled him out. He wound up getting like 6 months in jail, followed by a couple years probation. And so he gets out of jail after 6 months. Harry from the Hamptons, he starts his probation. About a week into probation, he calls his lawyer and he says, "There's my probation officers at my house, and they said they want to get my DNA because they want to put it in a system called CODIS, which you and I know it's a national database.
Right.
Basically, any unsolved crime where they get DNA, fingerprints, anything like, they put it into this national database, CODIS." So he said, they want to get it and put in my DNA, put in the database, see if any unsolved crimes, it matches. And this lawyer says, "Well, have you ever committed a crime before?" He said, No, I'm good. He said,
First mistake, don't believe your client completely.
Exactly. Right. That's why I preface it by saying he's a little bit of, not the best lawyer around. And puts it in, he gives them their DNA. The lawyer says, "Yeah, give them your DNA." So the truth is, he probably wouldn't have been able to fight it. He could have said no. They would have gone to court, gotten probably
They can compel it.
They can compel it anyway. So no big deal. That the lawyer really said, go ahead and give it to him. It made it easy. A week, well, actually, it was about 30 days later, because it takes a while for the crime labs to run lab tests and so forth. They come back and they arrest Harry from the Hamptons for sexual battery and kidnapping on a minor.
Oh my
A
God.
very, obviously, much more serious than selling stolen jet skis.
Wow.
So there was a match in this CODA system. So you say, well, Harry, what happened here? Tell me your story, right? So he tells me that he meets a woman that he's been dating. He's been seeing her, and that he parks his truck by the water, and she gets in his truck and they have sex. And I go, why aren't you at her house or your house? He says, well, she's married, she has kids. She said, we're having an affair. So this is where we kind of meet up all the time. It's like a little park on the water.
I hope it was a big truck.
So yeah, it was a big, really nice, expensive pickup truck. 'Cause he came from a very wealthy family, so there was plenty of room for them in his truck. Well, they have sex in his truck, and then she gets out and she says, I want to go for round two. And he says, well, no one's at my house right now. Why don't you come back to my house? So she says, okay, I'll meet you back at your house. So he says, all right, I'll meet you there, but on the way, I'm going to pick up some weed for us, some marijuana. She said, perfect. So she goes directly at his house. He makes this little detour through a neighborhood where he's bought weed before. He pulls over to the curb. Two young girls walk up to his truck, and Harry rolls his window down, and he says, they say to him, hey, you want, blow job? You want sex? What do you want? What do you want? He says, no, I don't want any sex. I want to get some weed. They're like, oh, you don't want any sex? No sex. I want weed. Okay, we'll get you some weed. One girl says, I'm going to go to where we have the weed. The other girl's going to hop in with you and take you around the corner to where you'll meet me to get it. She says, it's fine. So one of the two young girls hops in the truck. He drives just a short distance, a few hundred yards, turns right, a couple hundred yards, parks the truck, and he sees a small little, it's like a cabin basically. And it doesn't look like anyone lives there or whatever. She goes, we're going to go in there. We'll meet the guys. They'll give you the weed. We'll buy the weed from them. She says, okay. So he gets out with her. They walk up. He goes into this little room. It has a couple windows, like a storage room, basically. And as he's in there talking with her, he sees three guys and the other girl walking toward this little room, this little building. And the three guys all have baseball bats in their hands. And he immediately thinks, I pull up in a really nice, expensive truck. I probably have cash on me. They're going to jack me. He's like, this is not good. So this is his version. He throws the girl to the floor, and he does a beeline for his truck, running as fast as he can, hops in the truck. As he's trying to pull away, one of the three guys throws the baseball bat and hits the tailgate of his truck, but he speeds off, and he's fine. He gets back to his house. He sees the woman that he just had sex with. She's waiting for him. He tells her the whole story. He's like, I didn't get the weed. I almost got, taken down by these guys. But, and look at my truck. Right. He's all pissed off, his beautiful truck. And so that's what happens, right? That's his version of it. Well, It turns out this young girl, she goes home and she tells her parents, I was just raped. Um, I was just raped from the backside, she tells them, which
Right.
is really an important fact in this case. I was raped from the backside and it was horrible. And they call the police. They give her a rape kit and an inspection, a sexual battery, and they find Harry's DNA on this young girl, right? They find her. But what was important about her saying that it was from the backside is that the medical reports that I read from the rape exam say that there was no injury to her. There was nothing consistent with her having been penetrated in the behind, right? And so we know as lawyers and from the statutes that any sexual contact like that, if his DNA is on her, that can constitute sexual battery. You don't have to
Right.
have penetration,
Right.
but we start to think, well, there is, some a flaw in her story. Maybe she is lying, because there's no physical evidence to corroborate her story. So I said, Harry, well, how in the world do we explain if you didn't have sex and all you did was throw her to the ground and take off? What's your DNA doing on her? He said, well, it's simple. When I had sex in my truck 15 minutes earlier, I came on the seat. I didn't come inside it was on the seat. And when this girl got in my car, both girls had little mini skirts on. I thought they were hookers. They were offering me sex and all. It turns out this girl was not a hooker. She was a very good student. She had no discipline issues whatsoever. So to this day, I don't really quite understand I guess she just lived in a neighborhood and whatever.
Yeah,
but
why was she involved in that whole
why
thing
was
to
she
begin
involved
with?
to begin with, right?
Right.
But there was no cracks in her background
Right.
other than being involved in this incident. So he said there's no question. When she got in my truck, she sat on the semen, and that's how my DNA got onto her, 'cause she had a mini skirt on. So he was so confident and representing that this is exactly what happened. I said, okay, well, I'm going to need to speak to your girlfriend, this woman you're having an affair with. Is she willing to come forward? I think he's going to say no. I mean, she's married, she has kids. So, she's like a 44-year-old woman, no criminal record whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yes, she'll talk to you. Of course she'll talk to you. She doesn't want to see me go to jail. She's going to tell you the truth of what happened. Great. I meet with this woman. She confirms everything to the T that Harry told me. Everything, exactly as Harry said.
Wow.
About the truck, about the semen on the seat of the truck, and that he showed her the dent in the truck, and she knows for a fact that dent wasn't there when they first met up at the beach. So I'm thinking, this is a witness with tremendous credibility, because I say to her, do you realize if I put you forward to the prosecutor that this is going to be public? Your husband, your children are going to find out. Which is interesting because you just talked about a client who had two families, right? And he didn't want to tell. Well, she was like, "Guy, I know that this didn't happen, and it will be a risk to my family, but I have to do what's right here." And she was willing to testify. And I'm like I just said, can you ask for any more credibility than that? A married woman who's looking at risking and losing everything. Again, no criminal history whatsoever, and so forth. So I was okay. She lives in a really nice, expensive home on the ocean in the Hamptons. So talk about losing everything. She really had everything to lose. So we get this prosecutor who was a very good prosecutor. She was the head of the sex crime division. And
Where was this case?
this was the Hamptons up in New York.
Oh.
Yeah. So the prosecutor was the head of sex crimes. She kind of laughed at me when I told her this whole story and so forth. But she did give me a reasonable offer of only 5 years,
Oy.
right? Which is still a lot of time, but, she could have easily given 30 years, right? So we had a good rapport, and she came down a lot to that 5 years. But Harry refused. He said, I will not admit something I did not do. And have a witness and so forth. So, and a valid explanation. So this was a great case because since the family was wealthy, I was able to really do a lot of work on this case, which included what we call focus groups or mock trials.
Right.
And we would present this version, Harry's version of what happened, and to group after group after group, and none of them believed him. We actually had someone, a private investigator, go just randomly walk up to people at the mall and say, "Let me run this scenario by you."
I have one question.
Sure.
Without getting too lurid here, where was the DNA found on the
Right.
woman?
It was found in her crotch area,
So
but
it
not
was-
inside her.
But it was consistent with the story that she could have picked it up by sitting on a portion of a seat where his DNA and the semen was.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
Continue.
Yeah. So, yes. So he refused. So we tried these mock trials. They were just, and he really, you know, lawyers get to make strategic decisions, but there's a to an extent, you know, the client obviously has a lot of say.
Right.
And he would not allow me to present any other defense. Like, guy, this is the truth. This is my truth. And this is the defense that you need to go forward with. I actually prepared a document that told him, you know, we've tried all these mock trials, these focus groups. We've even had a private investigator randomly pull people aside at the mall or here or there and say, "Hey, here's this fact scenario. What would you think?" I said, "None of it's coming back favorable, but yet you are authorizing me, directing me to go forward with that at trial." And he signed off, "Yes, I am." So, and if he loses a trial, it's punishable by life. As you know, he's going to be in prison for life. The judge had no discretion but to sentence him to life in prison if we lose a trial. So we go to trial. This woman testifies as promised and exactly consistent with what she told us happened. And the jury goes out. Oh, by the way, one of the things, you know, when the young girl said it was in her, you know, behind, this was something that came out. The explanation was that she was a virgin. She had never had sex before. And what happened was, as we listened to everything and developed the case, she told them that it was so painful that the officers just assumed, and the nurses who did the rape exam assumed that it was a rape from behind. And it turns out there was actually, as she understood more, she said, "No, this was not in my behind. It was in my vagina."
Right.
That's why they didn't see any injury to the victim's behind area. So we had a tough trial. The jury goes out to deliberate. And this was actually, as a side note, I'm in the hallway of the courthouse talking to one of the bailiffs about the trial. You know, we do that a lot, as you know, when the jury's out deliberating, you kind of get the clerk of court's opinion. All these people who sit through the whole trial, you know, they love to pontificate.
Oh, you always love to hear their view.
Yeah.
Half the time it's wrong.
Yeah, why didn't you ask this? Why didn't you ask that? Or what did you mean? So anyway, I'm outside the courtroom in the hallway looking out the window, and we're just BSing about the trial and predicting what's going to happen. And across the street from us, from the courthouse we're in, there's kind of a taller building, maybe 10 stories tall or something. Bailiff and I are just talking, and we see, it was the worst thing, we see someone jump off the roof of the building to their death, a suicide.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, while we're sitting there waiting for the jury's deliberating,
That's
we're
an
waiting for
omen.
a verdict. Yeah, it basically was a foreshadow of
Right.
how the verdict was going to come back, because my guy is going to be punished by life as well, PBL, punishable by life. And yeah, it turns out that, so we found out because he was listening to his scanners, then we looked up, and this gentleman had been at work. Police came to him and said, "Hey, we need to talk to you. We understand we're investigating you for some child pornography issues, and would you like to talk with us?" He said no. So they said, "Okay, that you don't have to, but we're going to go to your house now. We have a search warrant here. Would you like to come to watch us, witness us search your home?" He said no. And what he did was he left his work after the police left, and he drove straight to this office building to meet with a criminal defense lawyer. And when he spoke to the criminal defense lawyer, the lawyer basically said, you know, these are really, really tough cases to win. They're, you know, it's going to be tough. You know, this is an uphill battle. It's going to be public. We can win, but it's going to be an uphill battle, and it's going to be public. And it was so upsetting to this gentleman that he then got to the roof of the building somehow and jumped to his
Oh, my
death.
God. And I guess the
Yeah.
lawyer explained that later to the police.
Yeah, and the lawyer, you know, it's been a lot of years since this happened, and I don't think to this day the lawyer is the same. You know, he's
That's
very
a profound effect.
profound for sure. So the jury wasn't out very long, and you know, we've been lucky. We've won a lot of cases, but we certainly don't win them all.
That's for sure.
You know, statistically, the government wins more than they lose. And so in this one, the verdict came back as guilty. And another moment of, you know, the movies are made out of, right after the verdict, well, I should preface it by saying throughout the entire trial, and it was about a 4 or 5 day trial, the defendant's father was sitting in the back row, and he was so polite and so quiet and respectful, dressed appropriately every day for court. And he had been at all the hearings for like 2 years while the case was pending. Always really a really gentleman, true, nice gentleman. As soon as that verdict came back, the father got up from the back row and ran full speed down the courtroom into the area that the lawyers are, the well, as we call it, right, and jumped on the prosecutor, literally leaped onto the prosecutor, yelling, "You just convicted an innocent man. You convicted an innocent man." And a female prosecutor, head of the sex crimes division, started to swing at her. Of course, within not even a second, the deputies were in the room. Now, another little side note that we know that our viewers probably don't know, whenever a verdict is about to be rendered, they bring a lot more deputies in. Usually there's 1 or 2, maybe 3 in a courtroom. But when a verdict's about to be rendered, certainly on a crime that has some serious potential prison time, there could be 8, 10, 12 deputies.
Right.
I'll tell you, they were on top of this guy so quickly, and he was lit up with these lasers all over his body. I could see everyone had their gun on him ready to, yeah. And so fortunately the prosecutor wasn't hurt. And by the way, that prosecutor became a judge about 8 years ago. Very well respected, very, you know, a lawyer's lawyer. She's a great judge, and you know, she was strong, so she was able to put that behind her. And they locked the father up for about 6 hours, and then she actually said, "You can let him go now." And they never charged him. They did not charge him. I thought she did the right thing with that. So anyway, so then it gets even better. I know you think that's the end of the story, but it's not. The next day, and we don't make this stuff up. People probably think it's made up, but it's not. The next day I get a phone call from another married woman who lives in the Hamptons, super wealthy, who says, "I heard about the verdict, and what can I do to help him?" I'm like, "Well, we're probably going to file some appeals. It costs some money." She goes, No. I mean, to get him out of jail. She goes, I can be his alibi. I could tell you he was with me. What do you need from me? Like, there's no way, you know, that he can go away. He can't be convicted. He can't go to prison. He needs to be out. What can I do to help? Do you need an alibi? I said, "No, ma'am. I'm sorry. That's impossible at this point." Because we know he admitted he was there. He presented his truth. So you can't have an alibi. You'd be committing a crime. She's like, "Well, take my name, take my number, whatever." So a day or two later, no lie, I get another phone call. So now I have a third woman, one that testified, one that called me after trial. Now a third woman calls, says the same thing to me. Another wealthy woman, actually married to an elected official in New York, calls me, says the same thing. "I heard about Harry's conviction. I heard he's locked up now. We got to get him out. I need him out. I'll do whatever needs to be done to get him out." And I start to figure out, I go to Harry to visit him at the jail. I'm like, what is going on? How are all these women calling me? And it turns out that Harry is a pool boy at all these really expensive, rich homes in the Hamptons, and he's sleeping with lots of the wives.
I think that you actually called him Harry from the Hamptons.
Right.
He's horny Harry from the Hamptons.
Horny Harry. Well, certainly the ladies were horny for Harry.
God.
I should call the episode "Horny for Harry in the Hamptons."
Horny for Harry in
Yeah.
the Hamptons.
So Harry was he was a good-looking guy. Don't get me wrong. The ladies were all in their 40s. He was like in his very early 30s. He was well built, and you know, and the ladies loved him. He was a real gigolo.
Wow.
And so I guess that's the story of the pool boy, Harry from the Hamptons.
So Harry wound up getting a sentence of how long?
He got life in prison. The judge had no discretion.
Right. So he's in prison.
He's
now.
still in prison. I actually get a Christmas card from him, and believe it or not, he had a girlfriend, a live-in fiance. She sends me a holiday card.
Does he have conjugal visits?
No conjugal visits, and I've never looked into it to see if these lovely ladies are visiting him or not that he was having affairs with.
Wow.
But it's just remarkable to me that he must have been a great lover, that all these women were willing to put their life, their family relationships on the line for him.
It's not sounding consistent. He's with all these, mature women who are having consensual sex, and then he rapes this young
I agree with that too.
Doesn't make sense.
He, did he
In fact,
have
let me ask you this question. Had you known about all those women
right?
before, would you have put him on the stand to try to establish that here's a guy, it's not consistent with his sexual pattern?
Right. So I had a case earlier. I did think about that because I had a case a couple years before this one where my client was charged with picking up a couple different prostitutes. They think 3 different occasions, undercover cops. And the wife, when we were meeting, his wife was with him, and she said, "There's no way this could be true." And I said, "How is that?" And they said, "Because every day he comes home and makes love to me. Like, he has so much sex with me, there's no way he's having sex with other women." So I had thought about that, and I said, "But if you're a sex addict, I think, you're having sex no matter what,
Right.
So I had thought about it a little bit, but I didn't know at that point that, but I was thinking, well, if he just had sex,
Right.
and he's going to go have a second round of sex, why would he rape someone in between? Makes no
Doesn't make
sense.
sense.
And his crimes before were petty, like dealing in stolen property, of
Did
stolen
you ever
jet
get
skis.
to, sometimes we're allowed, as we talked about before, to interview jurors after the trial.
Yeah.
Did you have that
Yeah,
opportunity?
not a formal interview. One called the office and said, were there any other possible defenses? Because that one was horrible. Yeah. And then after, as they were walking down the hallway, one of the jurors gave me a thumbs down type of,
Hey.
But shrug of shoulders, like, hey, sorry, good try type of thing.
It's like getting pregnant from a toilet seat, huh?
Yeah, that's what happened here. Yeah, so it was one of those cases that'll stick with me because he could have had 5 years.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot in the court, not really in our cases, because we
know the story of our client,
right.
who we'll talk about at some point,
Yeah,
who wound up getting 35 years, and he could have gotten probably 10.
right. Yeah, well, there was a time where we were negotiating for house arrest.
Yeah.
You remember? Yeah. So it does happen a lot. And you say, boy, they're kicking themselves now because he could have been 5 years, good, and
Well,
been
that's
done.
an incredible story
Yeah.
about Horny Harry, or Horny for Harry, or
Right.
whatever you want to call it.
Stay tuned for the movie.
Yes, stay tuned for the movie.
All right.
So anyway, until the next time, I think we're going to close it up. Until the
Let's
next
do
time,
that.
ladies and gentlemen,
Gentlemen,
you're
free to go. Down Low Investigations is a sponsor of You're Free to Go. Behind every great criminal defense attorney is a great private investigator. That's why Marc and I use Down Low to investigate cases all over the country. Down Low can help you too, whether you're running a background check on an employee or running a background check on a blind date, or let's say you need someone followed or some other type of investigative work conducted. Down Low is the way to go. Call Download Investigations at 561-843-1806. Everything expressed and discussed in this episode are the opinions and experiences of attorneys Guy Fromston and Marc Nurek and their guests. All ethical rules are complied with. Attorney-client privilege and confidential information is not shared or released during these episodes, and names, dates, locations, and other identifying information may be changed to protect confidentiality. Topics are embellished, and none of the statements made constitute legal advice and should not be considered or relied on as such.